Welcome to our second National Academy of Construction Ask Me Anything webinar for spring 2025. My name is Susan Bogus. I am an NAC member and chair of the Gerald May Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering at the University of New Mexico. The theme for this semester is entrepreneurship in the design and construction industry. The National Academy of Construction was established in 1999 to recognize our industry leaders. An important purpose of the Academy is to share the collective knowledge and experience of our members to improve the industry. We have established the Ask Me Anything webinar series to help transfer knowledge of our members to the next generation of construction leaders, with this webinar providing a means to link past and present participants in the construction industry. Our sponsors this year are the University of Florida Rinker School of Construction, Arizona State University Del E. Webb School of Construction, and the University of Colorado at Boulder Construction Engineering and Management Program. The format for these webinars is simple. Our speakers will make a short presentation about a topic and their perspective on the industry, followed by time to answer your questions. If you haven't submitted your questions yet, please email them to nacama@austin.utexas.edu. We have added this to the chat, so please submit your questions. You can submit more than one question if you want, no limits. One student will be randomly selected to win a $500 scholarship, which will be announced at the end of the event. So now to our speaker for today. Theresa Kern is the president of MA Rebar Services, one of Chicago's largest women-owned subcontracting firms serving the commercial, industrial, heavy, and high-rise construction markets. With the company since 1981, she has supervised the company's participation in many of Chicago's largest construction projects. She has 3 times served as national president of Women Construction Owners and Executives, a national association of women business owners in the construction industry. Theresa was also a director of Associated Steel Erectors and a management trustee of the Structural Iron Workers Local No. 1 Health and Welfare Fund. She has served on the Chicago Build for Olympics Labor Subcommittee and on the Joint Conference Board of the Construction Employers Association. In 2022, the Illinois State Toll Highway Authority honored her as Contractor of the Year. The Women's Business Development Center named her Entrepreneurial Woman of the Year. She is also the recipient of the President's Award from Women Construction Owners and Executives. Theresa, welcome. So glad that you can join us today.
Thank you so much. Sounds like a lot.
So you want to just tell us a little bit about how you got into this business and got where you are?
Yes, necessity is always the mother of invention. I had worked for a company that poured concrete, and they had become involved in MA Rebar Services. This is back into like 1979, 80. And they ran the business pretty much into the ground. They had lost about $214,000 in the first 2 years, which is not that difficult to do with a labor business, especially when you're dealing with union iron workers and your benefits have to be paid on the 15th of the month. So I had just gotten divorced and I had 2 small children, and there were no debtors' prisons any longer. So I thought, I could do this if I just pay attention during the day, and I could handle this as well as they did. And I offered to buy out the rest of them once I was able to collect some receivables, do some good work, profitable work. And of course, they all said, great, that's a terrific idea. And it took me almost 4 years to pay back the $214,000. But during that time, I was learning more and more and more about the business as time went on. One of the other things too was it was kind of a baptism by fire. I couldn't go and get a bank loan from anybody. because I owed this $214,000. So I ran the company for the first 5 years on credit cards when they were 24%. And probably I couldn't get away with this today, but this was a long time ago. I would borrow on a credit card, make a payroll, collect a receivable, pay the credit card, borrow on the credit card, make a, it was like rotating funds when they were 24 and 25%. And that went on for some time. And then toward the end of the 80s, I was pretty much on my feet again and able to carry on. But MA Rebar is a specialty subcontractor. So we don't, we are at the bottom of the food chain. There aren't a lot of trades that are beneath us, maybe landscapers, that's probably about it. But another reason I got involved in it is it used to be a very simple business. You get the rebar delivered, you put the rebar in, the rebar pile is gone, you go home, you bill the contractor, the contractor pays you, and everything is fine. Well, unfortunately, that's not the way it is any longer, but that was back in the day when construction used to be a lot of fun, but now it's gotten to be a little bit more technical. And, there's some things that are going on now that, you have to have a cast of thousands. Every time they make a new rule, you have to add on another person. But it's a good business, and it's allowed myself and my children to have a good life. And it's pretty much where I came from. So we've grown from a 10-person field, and at some points in time during the summer, we'll be up to about an 80 group of iron workers. So we've really increased our capacity and the projects that we've completed.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that history. We've got some questions here from some of our students. I'll start with a question from Hoda. What are some common mistakes that new entrepreneurs or owners make in this field?
Well, I don't know if it's just in my field, but in any field, I think entrepreneurs make the mistake of thinking that once they become an entrepreneur and they own their own business, that they won't have to work so hard. It's definitely not the truth. If you want to go into business so that you can have a lot of time off and make your own hours, that may not necessarily work. You're the owner of the business. You have to be there at everybody's call, and you have to solve every problem. And, you just can't pick and choose when you want to address the issues. That's the major one that I see.
So maybe a follow-up question to this would be, then if you were to mentor someone wanting to get into this business, what sort of advice would you give them?
I would tell them to work hard, try not to make every issue a matter of life and death. You can't approach a job, especially not out in the field, so that you can say, well, I'm right, you're wrong, go away. You have to negotiate. You have to try to feel your way through a problem. You can't just stamp your foot and say, well, I don't like your thinking and I'm just going to take my toys and go home, because that doesn't work. That's one of the things. And you have to kind of keep your eyes and ears open. You have to know what's going on around you. You can't assume that somebody else is going to take care of things for you, or they're just going to automatically disappear, because they won't. So.
All right. Here's a question from Nada. Her question is, what key challenges did you face as a woman leading a major subcontracting firm, and how did you overcome them?
It's a really good question. There were a lot of challenges, actually. In the beginning, people would call and they'd say, let me talk to Mr. Kern. And I would say, there is no Mr. Kern here. And then they would immediately hang up in my ear. So I got tired of that. So I kept saying, oh, he's out to lunch. And then they would start to talk to me. So that kind of went away. But it's, I was involved in union negotiations with the iron workers. I was the chair of the negotiations. And years before me, they would always make the decision in the men's room where the contracts would come out at. You know, where if they would be $2, $3, $4 benefits, blah, blah, blah. So I was the lead on the negotiations, and we were all standing in the hallway, and the lead negotiator for the ironworkers said to a competitor of mine, "Hey, George, come into the men's room. I want to talk to you about something." And I just followed right behind him. And I said, "If you're going to talk about the wages and negotiations, I'm going to be there too, because this is my job." And of course, they got exasperated and said, "Forget it," and just decided that wasn't a good idea anymore. But sometimes you have to just push yourself in there, and sometimes it's awkward, sometimes you feel uncomfortable, but you know, you can't not be heard, especially when your livelihood is on the line.
Mhm. So here's a follow-on question that Nada had. How do you see women's leadership in construction evolving, say, over the next 10 years?
I think women are probably the best people in construction that there are. Women don't have to be, you know, punch list is not a dirty word to women. We're used to that. We're used to cleaning up other people's mistakes. We don't push them underneath the rug and say, "Oh, that's not my job." So I think women really have, they're very detail oriented. They finish the job that they start. They, you know, they just are very, very good at being a contractor. And I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot more women in high visibility positions, owners. You know, you might see another Bechtel owned by a female, or a AECOM owned by a female. It's not going to be an unusual occurrence like it is now. So the sky is the limit as far as I care.
That's good. That sort of goes along with what I heard. Gosh, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? We had our Women in Construction Week,
Mhm.
celebrations, and
Right.
very similar things I was hearing from other leaders. So,
Yep. I mean, it really is the truth. I mean, it's a good industry. Women are very well equipped for it. And as long as they want to work hard and keep moving up the line, they will be able to.
right. Okay. Here's a question from Mir about diversity and inclusion in the construction sector, and
Mhm.
how, what have you sort of found to be effective in either, kind of growing that, making it more inclusive, or an inclusive environment, or evaluating your workplace for how inclusive it is?
Well, given the current climate, it's pretty sticky. But when I first started in business, I wanted to be a rebar contractor, not a female-owned rebar contractor.
Mhm.
And I picked out the guy that I thought was the most successful in the job that I had chosen, or in the role that I had chosen. And I tried to model my business after his. Just trying to make sure that I had, you know, my T's were crossed, my I's were dotted. I had all the necessities that I needed to become a legit contractor. And that seemed to help quite a bit. And it's kind of bizarre because our business, or my business right now, is larger than his business. But
Hmm.
with this DEI and the DBE program, I don't know what's going to be happening with that, because I just don't know. It's going to be a tough road. I'm going to stay in there, keep swinging, and see what happens.
I think that kind of goes back to what you were sort of saying. You had the skills, you had the
Mhm.
attention to detail, you had the will to, to make it happen. And I think
Mhm.
that's,
The only
yes.
problem I've found out is, though, there's one other contractor in Local 1 that does what I do, who's been in business longer than I have. And if he wants to buy a job, he can lose money all day and all night. And I personally don't care to do that. So with this DEI, or I should say anti-DEI business going on, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, does he want to bleed for all these jobs and lose money or what? I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's like, what do they say? It's like trying to catch a falling knife. It seems to be what he's doing,
Uh-huh.
but
Oh,
we'll see.
okay. I mean, as a business owner, then I guess, how do you make decisions? It kind of goes on you. I guess maybe I'll put it on you. How do you and your company make decisions on which jobs you want to pursue? What do you look for in a job?
Well, any job that you get the right price for is worth doing. So it's not a question of necessarily what jobs you bid. I mean, we don't do any structural work at all. It's all rebar. But it's not necessarily what jobs you bid, it's how you bid them. What are your terms and conditions? What is your price? That's really what manifests itself as a good job or a bad job. And don't get me wrong, we've had some stinkers. We've made big mistakes, but we've also had some really good winners. So it's just I wouldn't go to Las Vegas and bet $100 on the slot machines, but I do this every day for a living.
So, it makes me, it actually makes me think of a question that I'm always curious about. How have you grown as a negotiator, or how have you honed your negotiation skills? It sounds like with negotiating with the unions, you've got a lot of experience with that.
Mm-hmm. I do. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but one thing I did learn early on is I have to learn to shut up once in a while and let the other side talk. That's really important. So that's part of it. But the rest of it, you just have to keep plugging. And if you think you're right, just don't be too offensive when you're trying to prove that you are. But I've taken several negotiating classes, and you can always learn more. It's not a finite science.
Mhm. So maybe tied with that, you mentioned you're a specialty subcontractor. Um,
Mhm.
how do you manage those relationships with, say, the general contractors? And
Mhm.
and and then maybe a second question is, how has that maybe changed over the years?
Well, we're fortunate enough to have several very large general contractors here in Chicago. It was different 20 years ago because you knew the owners of those companies, and now they've grown to be massive. So that's always good. And you have to treat the project managers and their what do they call them? Their junior project managers with utmost respect. I mean, you can't yell at them and browbeat them and tell them that they don't know what they're talking about because it'll get you absolutely nowhere. So I think it's just a question of treating people with respect and you know trying to get along on the job. It used to be fun. I mean, years ago, everybody'd work. They'd work hard. 3:30 would come along. You'd go home. You'd say, "Okay, this is fine," and start over again another day. But nowadays, we're kind of overrun with attorneys and everything else. So it's a little bit of a different story that we have going on now.
Hmm.
A little bit of a different approach.
And does that tie in, I mean, also with just how you build those relationships? How does that affect that relationship building?
It does. One of the things that they all have golf outings, they all have this, they all have that. I mean, I try to make MA Rebar as visible as possible at those events. Um, you know, it's you just try to be on their good side rather than their bad side. So,
Mhm. So there's a question here from Mahesh. It has to do with construction technology.
mm,
And so it says, with the rapid advancements in construction technology and stringent safety regulations, how can a new entrepreneur effectively manage rising project costs while also ensuring quality and safety?
Well, that's a really good question. One of the things that, and again, I mean, I have to apologize. I'm like one of the, what would you call it? We're a rebar setter. All I have really is labor. So it's not like I have to worry about concrete, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. You know, I don't have to worry about those other facets of the construction world. So my big thing is if I lose money on labor, then that's the problem. I have to make sure that I have a very good understanding of where I think my costs are going to be every June 1st. The iron workers get their raise June 1st. My insurance goes up June 1st. If I have any increases in FICA, FUTA, SUTA, those also go up June 1st. They go up sooner, but I only do it once a year, and that's June 1st. So that's, you know, that's the deal. And then the other problem is your production rates. We may bid a job and say, okay, we think we can get 1,000 pounds of man-day on this job, but we find out we're really only getting 800. And that you have to watch meticulously, because if you see that curve going in the wrong direction, you have to do something to try to save it immediately, because if they go south big time. So
Are you able to, how do I want to say that? So when you're talking about production rates, I feel like that's something that a lot of people sort of overlook or you know, maybe downplay it's important, but in a labor heavy, you know, contract that you have, you know,
right.
production rates are very important. What are some things that maybe affect that, and how would you turn those around? I mean,
Well, you try to get iron workers out there that are a little bit more productive, for one. You have to change up the crew a little bit. But one of the things, though, is you just, as far as making sure that the job comes in where it's supposed to, there could be a lot of reasons. You know, carpenters have to worry about how many boards or carpenters can nail a day. Everybody in some way has a production rate, but we primarily don't have a lot of material that we can spread out our costs on. We do buy material on some jobs, but not all. So the labor is really where our bread and butter is at. And it's just a question of making sure that your costs are as squeaky clean as they can be, and you know what you're doing, and you know, just try to make sure that you've got your bases covered.
I find that, I mean, I think that's so interesting, because, you know, you're working with people, and people can have good days and bad days, and
Sure.
you're absolutely right. Keeping your finger on the sort of pulse of the productivity is
Right.
really
One
important.
of the other things too, I mean, we've got union rules too. If it rains, they get paid for 2 hours and they go home. If it gets to 4 hours, they get paid for the 4 hours and then they go home. And then if it goes past 4 hours, we have to pay them for 8 hours, whether they work or not. So, you know, we've kept meticulous records. I have a spreadsheet that's about as long as my desk, going back 30 years. It says this is what we spent on rain time in 1978. This is what we spent on rain time in 1982. And then we try to average it at the end of the spreadsheet. So you got to try to cover yourself as much as you can. So
Oh, fascinating. Now, some folks may not be as familiar with the differences between, say, what a general contractor is responsible for and what maybe a specialty subcontractor is responsible for. And so could you maybe elaborate on, you know, how much labor versus materials, and how that might vary job to job that you all are responsible for?
Pretty much when we buy material on the job, it's about 40% material, 60% labor. For a general contractor, that could be anything. It could be, you know, 20% material and 80% labor. I mean, it just depends on how they skew their business. I don't even begin to understand that, but they have multi-trades. They've got operating engineers and carpenters and finishers and laborers and, tons of other kinds of people. So yeah, that's a tough one for me to guess.
Yeah. No, interesting. And then
Mhm.
another question, so kind of tied in with this, maybe how you kind of bid and price a job.
Mhm.
How do you address material price fluctuations? It sounds like your labor prices are sort of set by the year.
Mhm.
But material prices, steel, I think we've all heard stories about steel prices
Right.
and how they can vary.
Well, when I include material, which is rebar material, in my quote, I will get a quote from the material supplier, and he will have to hold that quote for at least 6 or 8 months. And then when I send my quote out to the general contractor, or to the concrete guy, I tell them, this is what I've got. I can hold that material price for 6 months. After that, it goes up 40 or 50 bucks a ton. Be sure you understand this because I'm going to be expecting you to pay it. So, and I'm a victim of their schedule. If their schedule gets behind, it's really not my fault that, they may go into the escalation period, but somebody's got to pay it. So, and I prefer not to pay it myself.
Right.
Mhm.
So tied
I
in,
try to make the quotes is really as specific and as crystal clear as I possibly can. I don't want to argue about things 4 months down the road.
right, absolutely. And so schedule, that is an interesting thing too, right? Because I think a lot of students, as we're studying and teaching construction, we're teaching students, to schedule out a project, and we're
Mhm.
often teaching them to sort of schedule as if they were maybe the general contractor, right? They're kind of,
Mhm.
but how do you look at your own schedule and how do you fit? I mean, like you said, you're at the mercy of the concrete people who are maybe at the mercy of another, trade or something like that. How do you handle that sort of uncertainty, schedule
Well,
uncertainty?
we're all at the mercy of the railroad because they do exactly what they feel like doing around here. As a matter of fact, we're starting 2 jobs in about a month. One job we bid in 2021. It's just
Oh,
starting
wow.
now. Yeah, isn't that awful? That is
Mm,
awful. So, we put stopgaps in our proposals and in our contracts. Every June 1st, we have to have an escalation. I mean, the contractors squawk, but I mean, 3 or 4 years, I can't hold the pricing for that long with iron workers. None of them, I
mhm,
couldn't get any of them to work for me.
mhm.
They would run down the road. So that's the best way that I know that I can save myself. But of course, then a lot of times it'll wind up being litigation. So,
Because of like pricing
mhm,
escalation and things like
right.
that.
And then
Okay.
I had a contractor a couple months ago was on a tollway project, and he sent me the contract. I adjusted the contract to say my price is good until June 1st of 24. After that, you've got to add 6%, blah, blah, blah. And he signed it, sent it back. And then after I sent him the first bill, he said, I'm not paying that escalation. You're tied to my contract with the tollway. I said, I really don't care about your contract with the tollway because your contract is with me. And I found out something that I didn't know before. And an attorney told me, she said, you have no, that's not your problem. That's his problem. He accepted your terms, and he's
Hmm.
got to pay you. So,
Right. He's sort of in the middle. Yeah,
mhm,
but you're right.
right.
Okay.
But then why wouldn't he include an escalation in his own bid? I
Right.
mean, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but geez, this is not fun. This is work. So
Right.
I don't know.
Interesting. Interesting. So, all right. I've got, so I have a question here that is, it's fairly broad, but how has the industry changed since you started? So let's say if I was going to start a company now,
Mhm.
be an entrepreneur and start a company now, what might I experience that's different than what you experienced when you started?
Well, hopefully, the industry would be a little bit more receptive to you now than it was 30 years ago. That would be the hope. It's not easy, but I think it should be a little bit better for women nowadays. It's kind of a question that you have to ask a 40-year-old. I mean, I don't know how they feel about that, but it was hard. I mean, I can remember going to meetings back in the day, and this one guy who was the executive director for the road builders, he said there was 5 or 6 of us that were friends. You know, we kind of grouped together, and he said, "Oh, you little ladies don't want to be here. You want to be home making cookies. You can go ahead now if you want." It's like one of the women wanted to just punch him, but you know that it would have been not cool. But stuff like that doesn't happen so often anymore. So, but it's hard. It's hard, but you've got to latch yourself onto somebody that you know that you can ask questions of, and that they will give you a solid answer. I think that's one of the most important things for women, is to get themselves attached to an organization of like-minded women that will say to, you know, will give them straight answers. You know, you might say, "Hey, I really need to do something with my insurance. It's getting way, you know, beyond reality." And somebody will say, "Hey, I've got a really good carrier. Why don't you call them?" And you know that she's telling you the truth. She's not lying. So I think being part of an organization is very important.
I could see that as an entrepreneur, you know, especially when you're just starting out, right? You have maybe a big vision, you have confidence, but you may not have a lot of experience
Right.
in the actual day-to-day running of a business. And I could see how for any entrepreneur, it could be very important to either get a mentor or, like you said, find an organization
Right.
that, you know, people that you can ask questions of. I can see how that could be very important.
And I think women are very ready to help other women, other men. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's kind of their DNA. They like to help people to succeed.
Okay. So if someone asked you why should I, you know, consider joining a specialty contractor, or why should I consider, you know, that as a career path, what might you say to someone?
Well, I would say that it's a good, clean way to make a living. You know, it's not, it's a people business. It's one of the, you know, last few people businesses that we have. I have a great group of iron workers that work for me. We've all heard horror stories about iron workers that are terrible. I thank God don't have any of those. But I think it's a good business. I mean, I just couldn't imagine myself doing anything else for my lifetime other than this. And it's good because sometimes you win. That makes it even better.
Fantastic. How many projects would you say that you have going on, your company has going on at any one time?
Well, it could be 10 to 15. Some are small, you know, some of them are small, but right now we probably have about 6 or 7 large projects going on. We're doing a bridge in southern Illinois over the Mississippi River.
Oh,
It's kind of
fun.
exciting. Yes. And that'll be another 2 years on that job. So that's very good. So we do a lot of, right now it's a lot of highway work because the high-rise market in Chicago is pretty much dried up, but hopefully it'll come back someday.
Interesting. So maybe I've got another sort of general question. Maybe you could tell us what have been some of your favorite jobs over the years?
Well, the first job that comes to mind is the Navy Pier expansion. That was just a fabulous job, even though it was in January and our guys were working out at the end of the pier. And when I would go there to see them, their mustaches would have icicles hanging down from them. But that was a great job. Another job that we did was Millennium Park.
And what is that? Some people may not know what that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Millennium Park is a huge park downtown in Chicago on Michigan Avenue, and it goes from Randolph to, I can't remember the South Street, but it's a beautiful park, beautiful. And it was kind of a cool job because we started it out we started out on that job with a company we had done a lot of work for over the years. And they were a suburban contractor, and I don't know what the story was, but supposedly Mayor Daley, the second Mayor Daley, wanted one of his own people there, not this suburban contractor. And they found out a way to terminate his contract for convenience. First time I had ever heard that statement, and I thought I was gonna die. What does that mean? They owed me like $300,000 or $400,000 at the time. What does termination for convenience mean? Do I get paid? And the guy who was the head of the City of Chicago project called everybody in, and he said, well, you're going to have to rebid this job. Maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. And it was dire, absolutely dire. But I was able to bid it again, and I was able to get the job again. And we were one of the few companies on that job that started it, completed it, and got paid for it. So that was that was really a feather in our cap, I think. So, and it was one of the first big jobs we did. I mean, it was about a $6 million labor job, and it was in 2001 and 2. That was a biggie.
And I know you hate to think about these, but what are some jobs that maybe not so much what jobs went wrong, but what are some of the things that have gone wrong on jobs that you learned from?
Well, there's always a reason why. Usually it's because maybe our bid wasn't right to begin with. But then there's also, some contractors are just very difficult to work with. And over time, we've learned to just, separate them from our list of preferred contractors. We just don't bid them anymore. And it seems like things go a lot better that way. And, as I've gotten older, I don't want to do work for everybody. I want to do work for people that want to make money, that want to do a job, finish a job, close out the job, get paid for the job, and move on. I don't want to just have to aggravate myself every day. It's too hard. So I've kind of been trying to seek out those types of contractors. We still do have a few here.
Okay. Well, good. I think I'm going to wrap up here with sort of one final big picture question, right, for you. Where do you see the future of your industry of rebar in terms of people, technology? What's it going to look like in 10, 20 years?
I just don't know because I have a double-edged sword here. Not only am I a rebar setter, but I'm also a union contractor. And if the union goes away, then I can probably kiss my world away. But I don't know. I got a thing from Nucor rebar the other day, which is one of the largest rebar suppliers in the United States. It's a publicly traded company. And they're building things, I believe, in Ireland that go out to the job and you just pour the concrete. You don't need anybody to tie it or fix it or do anything with it.
So it's like prefabricated and they send it out there?
Yeah, that kept me up for a couple nights.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you see technology in terms of like, machines that will tie off, rebar automatically and things like that. I'm sure, technology wise, it'd be very, things could change a lot.
Absolutely. And I think they will. Our guys, we bought tie guns for most of our guys so that they could, when they're tying on bridge decks, I mean, you just bend over and tie all day long. But with the tie guns, you just have to stand up and you can just, hit the cross sections of the rebar where you want it tied. It saved a lot of backs over the years. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. But when you eliminate the need completely for an iron worker, what do you do then? What about all these people? But I guess we didn't have buggy whip manufacturers in the 1920s either. So I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah, and I suppose that's part of the challenge, right? Of being the owner, being an entrepreneur, right? You're always having to kind of be looking at what the next, where things
Mhm.
are going and be, figure out how to adapt.
Right, right. Yep, that's the hardest part of the whole, my whole career. It is the hardest part.
Hmm.
So,
Wow. Well,
mhm.
fantastic. I think we are getting to the end of our time here, so I'm going to uh first off, thank you, Theresa, for all your words of wisdom, your experiences. I love hearing about, stories, on the job stories, what went right, what went wrong, and I think it can be inspirational, to see that yes, things don't always go right, but yet you
Oh,
could still be successful.
yep, absolutely. You can.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, it was
Well,
my pleasure.
yeah, so I'll just wrap us up here. We do have a winner of our scholarship. Our winner is Hoda Alamrajabi at Virginia Tech. So Hoda,
Very good.
congratulations.
Congratulations, Hoda.
All right. Well, before we say goodnight, I would like to say a special thank you to our sponsors.
Hmm.
University of Florida Rinker School of Construction, Arizona State University, Dell E. Webb School of Construction, and the University of Colorado at Boulder Construction Engineering and Management Program. We look forward to seeing you at our next Ask Me Anything webinar, which will be on April 17th.
Very good.
So thank you. And thank you,
Thank you.
Theresa.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.